I didn't notice the fifth chair until the day he stopped coming to work. That's what won't leave me alone. Not the whispers, not the way the air changed around him, not what I heard in that break room the last week he was there. It's the simple, stupid fact that the day after he disappeared, I walked into the break room I'd seen 1,000 times before, and there were 5 chairs, 4 around the table, 1 slightly pulled back, like it had just been used. And every memory I had up to that point told me there had only ever been 4. I stopped in the doorway with my lunch bag dangling from my hand, heart picking up for no good reason. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. The soda machine rattled at the back wall. The microwave's clock blinked stubbornly at 12, like it always did. I stared at that extra chair. My brain tried to cover it up, the way your tongue keeps poking at a broken tooth. Maybe they brought in another one for a meeting, I thought. Maybe it's always been there and you're just tired. But even as I thought that, another memory pushed up. Birthday cakes, office parties, paper plates and plastic forks, and Bill from sales making the same terrible jokes. 4 chairs, 2 on each side, balanced. Now there were 5. I stood there so long that Cheryl almost walked into me on her way in. Whoa. She bumped my shoulder and laughed. Break room jump scare. You good, Aaron? Yeah. My voice sounded wrong in my own ears. Just zoning out. Relatable, she said, already crossing to the fridge. You grabbing the last slice of pizza? Or am I? I stepped aside, letting her pass. She never looked at the extra chair, didn't react to it, didn't pause to wonder when it showed up. Her eyes slid over it like it wasn't there. That was the moment something cold settled under my ribs. Because if I had walked into an empty room and felt weird, that would have just been me. Nerves, stress, too much coffee, and not enough sleep. But watching Cheryl move through the space like nothing was different, while my brain screamed that something had changed that was worse. I took the chair farthest from the 5th one and sat down. The vinyl was cracked under my legs. The table smelled faintly of old coffee and microwave lasagna. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang and rang and rang. I opened my Tupperware. The spaghetti inside had fused into one pessimistic mass. Kill me, I muttered. On the other side of the room, someone laughed quietly. Not Cheryl. She was fussing with the microwave, jabbing the buttons like they'd insulted her. I looked up. He was sitting at the table, opposite the 5th chair. His lunch was in front of him, neat and square. A sandwich in wax paper, an apple, a can of Diet Coke, sweating onto a folded napkin. He sat with his back very straight, like someone had told him how good posture was supposed to look, and he was still getting used to it. His name was Mark. He worked in claims. Early 30s, I guessed. Brown hair cropped short in a way that was almost military, but not quite. Wire-rimmed glasses. White shirt, slightly frayed at the collar. Tie knotted a little off-center. If you saw him in a crowd, your eyes would slide right over him. Background human. That was part of what made this so much worse later. Hey, I said, because I'd been raised to at least nod at people you saw every day. You skipping the meeting? He blinked like I'd pulled him up from under a deep layer of thoughts. What meeting? He asked. Bill and his charts, I said. 12:30. Conference B. You know the monthly. We're all a family hostage situation. A small smile twitched at the corner of his mouth. It didn't quite reach his eyes. Oh, he said. Right, I forgot. He hadn't touched his sandwich. He was looking somewhere just past the chair opposite him. Not at me, not at Cheryl, past the empty seat. My skin prickled. I told myself I was being dramatic. People stare into space all the time. Offices turn your brain to mush. I twirled spaghetti around my fork and shoved it into my mouth. As I chewed, I heard him say something, very low. Not to me. Yeah, Mark murmured. She noticed. The fluorescent light above us buzzed louder for a second. A high electric whine that made my teeth hurt. I stopped chewing. Sorry, what? I asked. He looked over like he'd only just realized I was there. "Did you say something?" I asked. He blinked once. Slow. His eyes were the washed-out color of cheap tea. "I said the meeting," he said. "I should go, I guess." He hadn't said that. Not out loud, anyway. "Right," I said. "Wouldn't want to miss the latest thrilling update on our growth trajectory." He gave that small, not quite right smile again and stood up. His chair scraped softly against the floor. As he passed the 5th chair, he paused. Just a heartbeat. His hand twitched, like he almost reached out to touch the back of it. Then he walked out of the room, the door side shut behind him. The hum of the soda machine came back into focus. "God, this pasta is awful," Cheryl said, flopping down across from me, plate in hand. "Hey, did you hear about, do we always have this many chairs?" I cut in. She blinked. "What?" "Chairs." I gestured with my fork, trying to sound casual. "There are 5. I thought there were 4. "We've always had 5, she said without even looking. "You okay? You look pale." I swallowed the cold lump of spaghetti in my mouth. It sat wrong in my stomach. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." "Tired is the office fragrance," she said. "You want part of my garlic bread?" "No, thanks." She shrugged and dug in. I stared at the 5th chair. The vinyl seat was smooth. No crumbs. No stains. No lazy tilt to suggest someone actually used it. But it felt used. It felt like someone had just stood up from it. And for the rest of my break, every time I looked away, I had the awful, crawling sensation that if I turned back fast enough, I'd catch it turned a little more toward me, like it had been listening. Chapter 2. The extra portion. If the story ended there with a weird chair and a coworker mumbling to himself, this would just be office gossip with extra steps. It didn't end there. The next week is when things started doubling. You have to understand, I wasn't obsessed with Mark. He was just one of those people you register as part of the scenery. I'd been at the company 3 years by then. I knew who microwaved fish, Todd. Who cried in the bathroom, marketing intern. Who always volunteered for birthday card duty, Cheryl. Mark was, quiet guy from claims. Sits alone in the break room. Probably owns a lot of beige socks. That was it. Until the lunches. It was Tuesday the first time I noticed. I got to the break room early, around 11:45, because my stomach didn't care about official lunch hours, and the morning had been an endless parade of faxes and numbers and passive-aggressive memos. The room was empty. 4 fluorescent panels glowed overhead, one of them slightly flickering in the corner. The soda machine hummed. The fridge wheezed when I opened it, rows of sad Tupperware staring back at me. I set my container on the counter, turned to grab a fork, and froze. The table was already set. Not completely. Not like some elaborate dinner scene. Just half done. On the far side of the table sat a plastic container with its lid still on. Next to it, a folded paper napkin. Beside that, a can of Diet Coke, beads of condensation sliding down its sides, one chair pulled out, one chair pushed in directly across from it. The 5th chair. Nobody else was in the room. "Hello?" I called out, because the silence felt too thick. "Mark?" "Nothing." I walked to the doorway and leaned into the hall. Empty. The copy machine across the way sat with its lid up like it was gasping for help. Phones rang faintly from distant desks. I stepped back into the break room. The Diet Coke can ticked as it adjusted to room temperature. I checked the vending machines, the small storage closet, the bathroom across the hall. Nobody. Back in the break room, the table looked like something out of a photograph taken 1 second after a person stood up. Something about the neatness bothered me more than if it had been messy. The container was exactly at the center of that side of the table, the napkin lined up with the edge. The can was placed precisely on the fold. It didn't feel casual. It felt arranged. I took the chair by the far wall again, the one that let me see the whole room. My own lunch suddenly seemed ridiculous. Leftover casserole in a stained plastic tub. A fork I'd grabbed from the drawer with a bent tine. I ate quickly. eyes flicking back to the waiting place, setting every few seconds. At 11:53, the door opened. Mark walked in. He didn't jump or startle or do any of the things you'd expect if someone found you sitting near a meal you'd already set. He glanced at me, then at the table. "Hey," he said, "early lunch?" "Yeah." I swallowed. "You?" He nodded. "I always eat at noon." He said it the way someone might say, "I brush my teeth," or "I breathe oxygen." An absolute. He walked to the table, sat in the chair with the container, and peeled the lid back with careful fingers. Steam rose, carrying the smell of rice and something tomato-based. He didn't look at the chair across from him, at the fifth chair. "Did you set that up before you left?" I asked. He paused. "Set what up?" The table," I said. "Your lunch. It was already out when I came in." He blinked once, slowly, like I'd asked him whether water was wet. "Yes," he said. "Just wondered," I said quickly. "Thought maybe I scared you off or something the way I was just here." His mouth twitched in that almost smile. "It's fine." He unfolded his napkin, placed it on his lap. Silence stretched. I poked half-heartedly at my casserole. I could have left it there. I should have. But my mouth ran ahead of my brain. "You want me to move?" I asked. "In case you're waiting on someone?" The air changed. Not dramatically. The lights didn't flicker. The room didn't shake. Nothing happened. But something shifted. Mark's eyes moved just slightly to the fifth chair, then back to his food. "No," he said very carefully. "She's already here." My spine tried to climb out of my back. I forced a laugh. "She? Who's she? Do we finally have another woman in claims? Or is this a ghost situation?" He didn't laugh. He took a bite of rice, chewed, swallowed. The clock on the microwave flipped from 11:58 to 11:59 with a soft electronic hiccup. "You're kidding," I said, "because the alternative was not okay, right?" He wiped his mouth with the napkin, folded it again along the same crease. "Do you ever," he said quietly, "get used to someone being in a room with you?" I stared. "That's how people work, Mark. We're in an office. There are people in every room." He shook his head. "Once." "No," he said. "I mean, when you're a kid, and you know someone's in your closet, or under your bed, even if you can't see them." I forced another laugh, thinner this time. "Wow, big therapy question for lunch." "You get used to noises," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "The creaks, the pipes, the house settling. You learn to ignore them, but the feeling." His gaze slid to the fifth chair again. "That never really changes," he said. Something cold gathered at the base of my neck. "You grew up in a haunted house or something?" I asked, trying desperately to pin this on something normal. Because my mom used to tell me if I felt like that, it was just my imagination. He smiled then. It was worse than if he hadn't. "Your mom was wrong," he said. Behind us, the soda machine rattled, compressor kicking on with a low growl. I swallowed hard. "So, who is she?" I asked, because apparently I enjoy suffering. "Your girlfriend?" His eyes flicked up, met mine, and in that moment, I realized I'd never actually held his gaze for more than a heartbeat before. They were light brown and very, very tired. "No," he said. "She doesn't like that word." He waited a beat. Then, as if he'd remembered we were playing at small talk, he added, "You hungry? You didn't eat much." I looked down. My fork sat in the middle of my food. The Tupperware container was empty. I didn't remember finishing it. I didn't remember lifting the fork to my mouth more than twice. "I'm fine," I said. He nodded, as if this was the answer he'd expected. "Good," he said softly. "It's worse when they're hungry." I didn't ask who they were. I couldn't make myself. From the hallway, Cheryl's laugh floated in, bright and oblivious. A door closed somewhere. Phones rang. Fax machines screamed. The office went on being an office. I stood up, my chair scraping too loud against the tiles. "I should get back," I said. "Deadline." He lifted his can of Diet Coke in a little half-toast without looking at me. "See you tomorrow," he said. Tomorrow. Not later. Not this afternoon. Tomorrow. Like the rest of the day didn't quite belong to me. As I left, my shoulder brushed the back of the fifth chair. For a fraction of a second, it felt warmer than the others, like someone had just been sitting there, like I was walking through the space where their body had been. I didn't go back to the break room alone for the rest of the week. End quote. The whispers started the following Monday, not all at once. First, it was just a feeling that conversations were happening a little too close by when I knew I was alone. You know how sound carries weird. In those old cubicle mazes, someone laughs 3 aisles away and it sounds like it's right behind you. This wasn't like that. This was the opposite. I'd hear Cheryl talking on the phone in her cubicle, clear as anything, and underneath her words, like a faint second track, something else, not words. Not at first, just the suggestion of speech, like someone whispering underwater. I told myself it was the air vents, or a radio somewhere. HR loved their little desktop radios, always tuned to stations that played 5 sad songs on a loop. But every time I muted my own phone and listened harder, the undervoice stopped. Until one day, it didn't. It was late afternoon, the kind of hour where the office feels like it's sinking. People on phones, people stapling things, people shuffling paper like it meant something. I was entering policy numbers, eyes starting to blur, when I heard it. "Hungry," something whispered, right next to my ear. I jumped, knocking my stapler to the floor. It hit with a crash that sounded much too loud. "Jesus!" I gasped, hand flying to my chest. Across the aisle, Mark looked up from his monitor. "You okay?" he asked. He sounded normal, confused, calm. I scanned the tops of the cubicles. No one was standing nearby. No one had leaned down to prank me. No one darted away laughing. The aisle was empty. "You didn't hear that?" I asked. His eyes flicked to the left, toward the wall we shared. "What?" he said. I swallowed. Someone said something. "People say things all the time," he replied. "It's an office." "No," I said. "Like right here." He watched me for a second too long, then gave that small, polite nod adults give babies when they babble something incomprehensible. "Long day," he said. "Take a break." I wanted to argue, to demand. "No, really, you didn't hear it? Right behind me? Right in my ear?" But the words knotted up, because I already knew what he'd say. No, he hadn't heard anything. The not hearing was part of it. That night, at home, every normal noise in my apartment sounded suspect. The fridge kicking on, the pipes, the neighbors moving around above me. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of the break room chairs, 4 in their usual places, 1 slightly pulled back. In the dream, I knew if I walked around to stand behind it, I would see the impression of someone sitting there, a ripple in the air, a hollow where a person should be. In the dream, I never made it that far, because as I moved closer, something behind me whispered, "Sit." It no, right against the back of my neck. I woke up with my sheets twisted around my legs, and my heart slamming against my ribs, like it was trying to get out. You can get used to anything if it happens slowly enough, even being scared. The whispers didn't come every day. Sometimes a week would go by with nothing but normal office noise and my own stupid brain for company. I'd convince myself it was stress, lack of sleep, something in the air. Then I'd walk into the break room and see that 5th chair pulled out just a little farther than before, always on the same side of the table, always facing Mark's seat. And the fear would bloom again, fresh and sharp and new. By the time October rolled around, the 5th chair might as well have been a person. I noticed how people walked around it without ever bumping into it, how no one ever shoved it aside with their hip or dragged it to sit somewhere else. It existed in this untouched zone of unspoken respect or avoidance. No one else commented on it, ever. The only time I saw someone almost notice was when Todd from accounting came in carrying his sad little yogurt cup. He nearly sat in it. His hand brushed the back. He paused, frowned, and moved to a different seat without really knowing why. "Don't like that one?" I said before I could stop myself. He blinked at me, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Which?" "That chair," I said. "The pulled-out one." He glanced at the table, shrugged. "Didn't even see it," he said. He popped the spoon into his mouth and went right on, scrolling through his sports scores. Didn't even see it. But he hadn't sat in it either. That afternoon, I caught Mark in the hallway by the elevators. He stood a little too close to the wall, as if making room for someone else. The elevator dinged softly behind him, doors opening to reveal no one. "You going up?" I asked, stepping out of the way. He looked at the empty elevator. His face did something strange, half flinch, half listen. "No," he said. "They are." The doors slid shut on nothing. A moment later, the elevator began to move. My skin crawled. I laughed. "Because it's what I do when I'm terrified." "You and your pronouns," I said. "You always talk like that?" He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, his expression changed. Not much, but enough. The corners of his mouth tightened. The lines beside his nose deepened, like he was frowning internally. "You always listen to things that aren't for you?" he asked. It wasn't mean. It wasn't even cold. Just curious. The way a scientist might ask a bug why it keeps walking into the same trap. I swallowed. "Sorry," I said. "I just forget I asked." He tilted his head just a fraction, enough to make the overhead light catch on his glasses. "It's better if you don't," he said. "Don't what?" He stepped past me, toward the office. "Notice," he said. Chapter 3. The Voice in the Vending Machine. By November, I started planning my day around avoiding the break room. Eat at my desk. Pretend I wasn't hungry. Pretend the smell of burnt popcorn didn't make me gag. Anything to not sit near that table. But the office has a way of funneling you into places you don't want to be. And that's how I ended up there one evening, alone, listening to a voice that didn't belong to anyone alive. It was a Thursday. Of course it was. Payroll had screwed something up, and half the claims department was missing overtime from the previous weekend. Mark had stayed late, and so had I, though for different reasons. He, because he always stayed late. Me, because I couldn't face going home to the dark silence of my apartment. I walked into the break room to grab a soda, praying the fifth chair would be pushed in today. It wasn't. It was pulled out farther than I'd ever seen it, like someone had risen from it in a hurry. I stopped just inside the doorway. Mark sat in his usual spot at the far end of the table. No food in front of him, no drink, just his hands folded neatly, like he was waiting for a meeting to start. His eyes were fixed on the chair across from him. The fifth chair. I thought he didn't hear me come in. Then his voice broke the silence. "They're upset," he said. My throat tightened. "Who is?" He didn't answer. Or maybe he did, just not in words. Because a moment later, the vending machine clicked. Not in its normal way. Not the cooling unit cycling, or the display panel flickering. This was a voice. Soft, scratching, too close, right behind the machine's glass. A whisper scraped through the coils of candy bars and chips. "Hungry." The sound hit me like a cold hand pressed against the back of my neck. I stepped back. Instinct. Pure animal panic. Mark didn't move. "They don't like being ignored," he said quietly. "They don't like being left out. They get louder." "I don't hear anything," I lied. My voice cracked on the last word. Mark finally looked at me. He looked tired. More tired than anyone I'd ever seen. Shadows carved under his eyes. Cheekbones sharper than they used to be. "You do hear it," he said. "That's why it chose you." I shook my head. "Don't say it like that. Like it's a thing." "It is a thing." "No, it's something wrong with the building, the wiring. Or maybe I'm just stressed. Maybe you're stressed. Mark blinked slow. No one else sees the chair, he said. No one else hears the whisper. Just you. My hands were shaking. I shoved them into my pockets so he wouldn't see. This is crazy, I said. We're talking like this is a ghost. He tipped his head. A tiny tilt. Ghosts are people, he said. The room suddenly felt too small. Isn't that what you think this is? He added. No, I snapped. Ghosts don't sit in chairs and drink Diet Coke. Mark actually smiled at that. A small, sad, crooked smile. She does, he said. I hated the way he said she. Like she was listening. Like she was always listening. I backed toward the door. The vending machine clicked again. 2 clicks. Like fingers tapping the inside of the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Each tap softer than the last. Each tap closer than the last. Mark didn't look toward it. He just said, "She likes when you stay." My hand found the door frame, gripping it so tight my knuckles whitened. "I'm leaving." "You can," he said. "She won't follow." My heart hammered. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Then why? I stopped. Because the real question wasn't why she wouldn't follow. It was why she didn't have to. Mark finished my thought for me. "She's already noticed you." A soft exhale drifted behind me, right behind me. I didn't turn around. If I turned around, I knew deep in the place where childhood fears live that something would be standing there, close enough to kiss the back of my neck. I stepped into the hallway. The sound didn't follow me, but Mark's voice did, barely audible over the hum of the lights. "You should stop eating lunch at your desk," he said. "It makes her jealous." I walked faster, then faster. Then I ran. I didn't stop until I was outside, breathing the cold night air like it was the only real thing left in the world. I didn't go to work the next day. I told HR I had the flu. I told myself it was self-care. I slept almost 12 hours straight deep, heavy sleep that felt like falling through dark water, and woke up feeling more rested than I had in months. For a moment, everything seemed normal. No whispers, no shadows, no fifth chair. Then I walked into my kitchen. My chair at the table was pulled out. Someone else's chair beside it, my guest chair, was pulled out too. Just slightly, just enough for knees. I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. The apartment was silent, dead silent. And then, very softly, like breath passing through teeth, "You didn't come." I spun around so fast I nearly slipped. Nothing. No one. Just my empty kitchen. The chairs still pulled out. My pulse hammered so loud I could hear it in my teeth. I grabbed my keys, my jacket. I didn't lock the door behind me. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove until I found myself in the company parking lot. On a Saturday. On a day no one should have been there. No one but Mark's car, sitting alone under the fluorescent security light. I parked 3 spaces away. My hands were shaking so badly I had to steady them on the wheel. The office building loomed above me, dark, except for one window, the break room. The light was on, and in the window's reflection, just for a moment, I saw 5 figures sitting at the table. One of them moved, and then the light went out.